I love talking about Paul Finebaum because he really is the voice of the SEC. And earlier this week on ESPN, he was asked about who the biggest threat was to Alabama nationally. And there was a lot of discussion of Oklahoma, Ohio State, Clemson, and Georgia. A lot about Oklahoma. I think actually, everybody is correct in that these are the best five schools. I think if you want to talk about Texas A&M, you're well within your right to do so. I don't. Cincinnati's got an opportunity to make some noise if they can knock off Notre Dame on the road. But with what Paul was saying, he thinks it's going to be Georgia that's the biggest threat to Alabama, and it's kind of an interesting. That's not interesting. It's an understandable take. The two of them do not play one another in this regular season. Here's what Paul had to say word for word. I think the biggest threat is in the SEC. I think after the first weekend, we are going to be talking about Georgia as a legitimate threat and just talking about to Alabama. I think they are going to beat Clemson, which I think is good, but maybe not as good as it has been in a couple of years. We all know that Trevor Lawrence is gone. I don't think the Clemson defense is elite. If Georgia goes into that game, or as elite, I should say, if Georgia goes into that game and beats Clemson, then all of a sudden we will be talking about the SEC championship game in December by the second weekend of September. I can't tell if Paul is trying to set Georgia up that if they lose, he will just run them into the ground, or if he really believes it. I think he really believes that they will beat Clemson, and I don't think it's for show. I mean, you wouldn't consistently talk about this. This has been something he's been talking about for some time. I know he does like to get, well, I don't know. It certainly seems like he likes to get under Dabo Swinney's skin, which is not that hard to do. But it's a challenging game, and I think before you start talking about Georgia challenging Alabama, look, I'm going to say this over and over again because it's not provable. But I don't. If Georgia can't beat Clemson, they're not going to beat Alabama, or at least the likelihood is very low. And Alabama may be rebuilding, Clemson may be rebuilding, but Alabama's a lot better at rebuilding than Clemson is because they've proven that they know how to do it over the last 13 years or whatever it's been that Nick's been there. So, I, let's chill that out a little bit until Georgia actually wins that game. That line is sitting anywhere from 3 to 4 if you want to go get it. I don't know if a lot of people are really playing lines yet on college football, but we've just gotten to the point for Georgia that it's all a lot of talk, which is the time of year that we're in. And if they don't beat Alabama or Clemson this year, there's going to be a lot of questions. There's going to be, and understandably so, as it relates to if Georgia's the biggest threat to Alabama. I do think I think Alabama's the best program in the country. I'm not sure with this season any of us should be so confident about. I definitely think there's a top 5. I'm not sure we should all be as confident about the order of the top 5. I mean, any of these teams that you look at, Ohio State, Clemson, Alabama, all three replacing really good quarterbacks. Justin, Mac Jones, Trevor Lawrence, those are all guys that went in the top 15 or 12, whatever it is in the NFL draft. They all should have been Heisman. They'd have been in New York if there was a Heisman thing. Well, maybe Trevor wouldn't have, but I think we know how good Trevor is. And then, the defense at Alabama was not as good last year as it should be this year. They weren't elite like they typically are. Like you can't score or move the ball at all. That wasn't really the case with Alabama last year. They should be better there, but they've got to prove that. When you look at Clemson's defense, they do have some issues that they haven't had in the past, but their defensive line is very good for sure. So there are issues there with Oklahoma. You look at, losing to Kansas State was just a strange loss. I think they lost to Iowa State too last year. And it's their defense. I mean, really more than anything, no matter who they lost to or who my memory gets right or wrong about who they lost to, the issue at Oklahoma has always been defense. But and then Ohio State, even though Oklahoma State's gotten better at defense, Oklahoma's gotten better at defense. And then you look at, Ohio State, and losing Justin's going to be tough to come back from. I don't care how good the next person is. There are growing pains, and that's going to be problematic for the Buckeyes. But they're as gifted as anybody in the country. I mean, Alabama, Georgia, and Ohio State have recruited at a really, really high level. And then you look at the Dawgs, and to me now, I cover Georgia, so I understand where the bodies are buried. There's question marks. There are a fair amount of question marks. There's not a ton of them. Last year you didn't even know who at this point, chaos had ensued at Georgia. You had a new offensive coordinator. You did not know who the starting quarterback was going to be because the presumed starter was gone. You had just, it was just a mess. Honestly, we barely knew who you're going to play in the 2020 season because that had not yet been sent out, I don't think. And then Georgia learned about the Arkansas game and I guess the Mississippi State game. So I think for Georgia, I think the biggest question is JT Daniels as good as he appears to be or appeared to be in those 4 games, number one. Number two, can you close out games? I mean, it's that simple. Georgia's lost 14 games, I think it is, under Kirby Smart, and 4 of them they had a halftime lead in those games. And of those 4 games, 3 of them were against Alabama, 2 of which were decided on the last play of the game. So and the other one of the 4 losses was the Hail Mary loss to Tennessee. So this is about closing out games for Georgia. If you get up on Clemson, I think Clemson's not the same thing to Georgia as Alabama is, and I don't know that it would be to anybody. Let's be honest here. One is not like the other. One is beating the other, but Auburn's beaten Alabama during this heyday of Nick Saban twice. So, I don't know. I think to me, when Paul is, a lot of people don't like Paul Finebaum, but it's a lot of, I guess, envy for his success or that they feel like he's slanted towards Alabama. I don't know, but he certainly speaks with gravitas when you're starting to talk about the SEC and the up-and-comers or the powers that be in this league. And I think that he is full-throated about his belief that Georgia is going to beat Clemson. I'm not sure I'm ready to be on that path quite yet myself for a lot of different reasons. But, when you read what he says here, I think they're going to beat Clemson. And if Georgia goes into that game and beats Clemson, then all of a sudden we'll be talking about the SEC championship in December by the second week of September. Well, he's right about that. That discussion won't stop. Maybe it will take a pause when you get to Jacksonville, but people are already assuming Georgia's going to beat Florida, which is, aggressive. But, at the same time, the Gators got to deal with Georgia, LSU, and Alabama all in the same season. It's going to be tough for Florida to survive that. And there's just not a lot of losses that you see on Georgia's schedule. So, I don't know. But I am not yet at the point where I am, beating the drum quite like Paul Finebaum. I also know that part of his job is to entertain. But there's a lot of different ways that he can entertain. And it doesn't have to be this, for lack of a better term, shtick. So I think he really believes it. I think he believes that Georgia is the biggest threat to Alabama. I rewatched that game last night, or this week, excuse me. I can see what you're saying for sure. There's a lot of, that Alabama's defense didn't stop Georgia's running game is something that, this is the first time in 2020 that Georgia really wasn't stopped in any reasonable way by the run game, by Alabama. And when Stetson was the quarterback, he made some mistakes for sure. He did not play well that night. But in the first half of that game, you would think that they were both pretty good teams and one wasn't much better than the other, which is why the game was 24-20 or 24-17 at the half. So I don't know, but I do think that this is something that a lot of people believe, except Las Vegas apparently, who continues to to lay that, put that line there. But it might just be so far that people aren't really betting on these games. So that could be a lot of the reason, is that stuff has come out and it's just not going to move for the time being. We'll just see. But I understand it. There's a lot to be optimistic about for Georgia's 2021 season, but it's not going to be smooth sailing the entire way. I mean, they're going to have beating Clemson for sure. No, I'm not with that. I mean, I don't buy that. I don't know if anybody buys that, but I'm just saying that's a challenging opener against a team that has been very good for a long time, probably a good 6 years at this point. But as a good, a very good insider and all this said, the loser of this game is really going to hear it for about a week and a half about how their program is not what everybody thinks it is. And that's I think that's probably true too. But that you play these games for a reason, and we're just going to see what happens. But Paul Finebaum's pretty certain what will happen. Hey, go to the site. We've got a great deal. 2 months right now for $2. Go up and hit it right now.